Hey, what is up guys? Welcome to MST.TV. This is Nishi here bringing you all another Market Watch episode. So I don't know why we would expect anything different, but we did see several more buyouts of cards over the weekend. I feel like that's just kind of what we expect every single day now, a new card being bought out. Even if not all copies of these cards have disappeared off the market completely, we're still seeing considerable price jumps of different things all across the board. As much as there's a lot to follow and pay attention to, I think that it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of chances for you guys to pocket some of the profits if you keep up with things and you're proactive about it. So please guys, remember to hit that thumbs up button for me, as it does help out a ton. Make sure you're subscribed to MST.TV as well to keep up with all of these market watches, as well as get all of the other amazing content that myself and Tombox bring to you guys. And let's get started. Alright, so we're gonna start off big here. Let's talk about Starlight Rare Storm Dragon's return. So this is a card that was actually quite cheap as far as Starlight Rares go, right? It was the lower end one around the $70 to $80 price range. However, over the weekend, we actually saw it spike up in price all the way to where it's now around the $170 to $180 mark. Now, this isn't a crazy price for a Starlight Rare, right? It falls kind of within the price range of some of the more mid-tier Starlight Rares that we've seen in the past, kind of like the Charmers, but not quite at the price of Appaloosa or IP Masquerena. Now, Storm Dragon's Return is actually a card that could see play in a future meta. It special summons a banished monster to your field and then returns that monster to your hand during the end phase. Obviously, as a trap, it can be a bit difficult to take advantage of, but we've seen cards like Back to the Front and Call of the Haunted see meta play within the last 5 years or so, and Storm Dragon's Return absolutely could see some usage in the right format if the game were to slow down a bit. Nevertheless, as far as I know, there aren't any decks in the game that are going to be using it for this upcoming format, though if you do know something, please let me know in the comments below. Now, as for what'll happen to it, I don't really believe that it's going to tank down to where it was before. Because it's a Starlight Rare, it will take some time for the quantity to restock on the market, and there's a lot less undercutting between vendors. Realistically, it'll take a week or so just for those quantities to appear, but I think it will fall down to around the $120 to $150 price range without a solid catalyst, without a real reason for this card to be that high, because it's gonna be in a meta deck. However, I do think it's pretty unlikely for it to fall back down to the $70 range from before, so it really depends on how badly you want to pick them up or let them go for if you think it's gonna be a meta card in the future. Next, we have Moray of Greed. So we're continuing on with our trend of a new water card being bought out every other day, and the next victim is the super rare version of Moray of Greed from Astral Pack 1, which has jumped up all the way to $16 a piece. So with Deep Sea Diva going to 3, people are getting really big on Mermails, and we're seeing a lot of high rarity cards like Alti Dragoons, Secret Abyss Megalo, or Super Deep Sea Diva getting bought out and spiking in price. Moray of Greed is cool because it's basically a hand reset, allowing you to put back cards that you don't need, like an extra copy of Deep Sea Diva or Neptabyss, and then draw key extenders like Abyss Gund or Abyss Tias. It's also probably not going to be a dead card very often. I believe the Mermail deck plays 30 or more monsters in it, so unless you're extremely unlucky, you should almost always be able to resolve it. Now, of course, there are common prints available, though if you want a holo, this is the only option you have. Now, as always, I'm going to recommend selling Super Rare Moray of Greed as a card that is temporarily hyped up to a somewhat ridiculous price point for the current format, and just play commons if you need to, and then you can look at picking up super rare copies after the hype has died down. So Traptrix Dionaea is a bit of a weird case. On one hand, with Traptrix Dionaea being revealed in Dual Overload, as well as Gravedigger's Trap Hole coming out in Eternity Code, a lot of people were kind of excited about the prospect of Traptrix this upcoming format. However, Traptrix has kind of flopped. I believe that we saw the occasional regional top from it several months ago as people started trying it out, but I haven't really seen the deck have any impact on the meta for the last month or so, not even in online tournaments. Despite this, Gold Rare Traptrix Dionaea has been bought out as the only holo version of the card, as I believe the only near mint copies available on TCG Player at the moment are sitting between the $8 to $10 mark. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a very important card in Traptrix, something you're definitely going to want to run 3 copies of. However, I don't believe that the deck is really going to do anything moving forward in this format, especially with a card like Lightning Storm running around at 3, so it's not something that I would be too worried about. Also, it kind of sucks for Traptrix players that the only holo version of Dionaea is gold rare. You'd think she'd at least have a super or ultra rare printing by now, but oh well. Yeah, so overall, not a card that I'm expecting to be meta relevant at all moving forward, so try moving it soon before another holo reprint is announced. So we've seen jumps in the price of a lot of different rank 8 options, and the next piece from that toolbox that I want to talk about is Alcide the Sylvan High Protector. Now, despite being a Sylvan card, this is a generic rank 8 monster that decks can choose to play as a way to remove a card from the field without destroying it. You just need to call the top card of your deck incorrectly, have a card sent to the graveyard, and then you get to place a card from the field to either the top or bottom of the deck. It also has 3,200 defense points, so it's a fairly big wall that can be difficult to get over in some decks. Anyways, this is a card that has never really been like a penny stock. It's always kind of been in that $2 to $5 price range, but now we're looking at $8 to $10 for either of the ultra rare printings. Last I checked, Sylvans aren't doing anything meta relevant, but with decks like Blue Eyes and Dark Lords being very popular decks with a lot of players and gaining a lot of traction, as well as the fact that apparently the new Machina structure deck cards help the deck to make rank 8s, it's a card that apparently quite a few players will want access to. Now, it has been quite a few years since the card's last printing, so I would expect to see it reprinted fairly soon, especially if it starts to pick up any sort of meta attention. I don't think it's quite big enough to take up like a Battles of Legends spot, but I could definitely see it as something like an OTS tournament pack common. Next, let's take a second to look at Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, which is probably the card that has seen the most play and the most competitive success over the last 3 to 4 years. Even in formats where Ash Blossom maybe wasn't the best hand trap, you would still see people topping with 3 copies of it mained because it was just that versatile and it could hit so many different strategies, and it's absolutely a staple in today's metagame. Fortunately, we have seen a ton of reprints of Ash Blossom, though the card actually remains relatively expensive for a card with so many printings, and all of these versions, even the lower rarity ones, are starting to climb up in price. So on one hand, we have the max rarity, which is the secret rares. We're looking at only $35 for unlimiteds, but a whole $60 for secret rare first editions, which is really up there, actually very comparable to its peak price of about $80. Then from there, all of the other printings, including the commons from the Salamangreat structure deck and the alternate arts from Dual Devastator, are falling between the $10 to $13 range. This is actually really crazy. I don't believe we've ever seen a card with this many reprints maintain such a price that's this high. Now, admittedly, this is a card that basically every single Yu-Gi-Oh player should be owning 3 copies of, because it is just that good. If you don't have the card by now, I mean, you may as well pick up your set. I'm actually really fond of the way that the secret rares look, so that's the set that I have. Although I could definitely see it being reprinted as either an OTS pack ultimate rare or even a Starlight rare in a core set sometime. At some point, maybe we will see a reprint that will tank the price, like if it gets printed as a holo in a side set and it isn't short printed in there and everyone just has like excess copies. But until we do hit that point, I would expect Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring to stay a really consistent $10 at minimum. This next one is something that I have found interesting because it's very similar to a card that has seen meta play, but it has actually been around much longer. Karma Cut has been out for many years, but despite having a very similar effect, Paleozoic Dynamiscus has actually seen much more usage in the meta. They're very similar, but there are notable differences in their effects. For one, Karma Cut requires a discard as a cost, while Dynamiscus sends it as an effect. So if Dynamiscus is negated, you don't need to pay the cost and discard a card. Also, Dynamiscus can banish anything, whereas Karma Cut can only banish a face-up monster, and also Dynamiscus can summon itself back to the field as a monster when a trap card is activated. Now, where the scales fall slightly in Karma Cut's favor is in its ability to banish cards with the same name as the banished cards from your opponent's graveyard as well. So in something like Eldritch, if you manage to banish an Eldritch on your opponent's field, you also get to banish Eldritch from their graveyard if there are any copies there, which could make it very difficult for the deck to function. Personally, I still think Dynamiscus is more valuable since you can out floodgates like Mystic Mine, but Karma Cut has seen a little bit of hype recently. Ultimate rares are around $30 a piece, and the supers from the infamous DR04 set are at $34, and there are very low quantities of each rarity available on the market. Now there are still other versions, most notably the DT, which are fairly cheap, though there's common and gold rares as well. Now while this card could be good in the future, I don't think that it's going to be good right now, so I would definitely consider moving your extra copies of this card while you can. Next, we have a card that I personally am really fond of because I always thought that it was going to be an amazing game-breaking card. That is Moray of the Trees. Now on paper, Moray has a great effect as you can detach an Xyz material to either Foolish Burial or Monster Reborn, a plant monster. However, I guess the condition of 2 level 3 earth monsters specifically is a little bit difficult to meet because the card never really saw any meta play. Also, we now have both Glow Up Bulb and Dandelion banned. So with Eternity Code fully spoiled, one of the TCG exclusives that kind of caught everyone's attention was Rose Girl, a level 3 earth plant monster that summons itself from your hand if a plant you control is sent to the graveyard, and it can also add itself from your graveyard to your hand if you control a plant monster. Now, Rose Girl is actually a really solid card, and because of that, people thought maybe it could potentially see play in something like Rika, where you could abuse Moray as well with the whole synergy with plants. Unfortunately, nothing has really panned out yet, as we don't see too many people next leveling the current meta with plant decks. But because of this initial hype, it's just the original secret rare versions from Shadow Specters that were bought out to around the $7 to $8 mark. You can still pick up the Megatin secret rare reprints for only around $2 or so, and that's cheap enough that I would definitely recommend grabbing yourself a playset of the reprints, just in case the card does start to see some play in the future. This one that we're going to talk about very briefly is just more of kind of like an FYI, but Gaia Plate the Earth Giant is suddenly a relatively expensive card, with the ultimate rares at a whole $18 each, and even the ultra rares at around $4 each. This is a somewhat significant price for a card that has historically been pretty cheap, despite never being reprinted. Now, however, with the release of the Adamancipator deck, people are thinking that this card could potentially see play, as it's fairly easy to summon in the deck. It also has the potential to help get rid of big monsters on your opponent's field as well. At the very least, I suppose, it's a body that you could use to link summon with as well. Ultimately though, I don't think that this card is worth the huge price tag, and honestly it seems pretty suboptimal. There's also the fact that it will probably be reprinted soon if there's a chance that it could see meta play, in order to give it the proper problem solving card text as well. Hopefully, if you have this and you can actually find them, you can move them for this inflated price soon before it does tank back down inevitably. So Vampire Sucker is a really amazing card for zombie decks. It's pretty simple to make with cards like Baylor Drock and Mizuki. It's very easy to use to generate free draws. Over the past couple of weeks, we've actually seen Vampire Sucker shoot up in price quite a bit, with the secret rares peaking at $16 to $20 but now settling down at $13, and even the ultras peaking at $5 but now settling back down at $3. Unfortunately, the card isn't seeing any meta play right now, as Eldritch is being played as more of a pure deck that doesn't really play any other zombie engine type cards. However, I believe that the deck will soon start playing these other cards, and that as a result, Vampire Sucker will start to increase once again in terms of price. One thing about the Eldritch deck is that once Dragoon of Red Eyes is on the field and gets an attack boost, there are basically no outs in the Eldritch deck unless they start to run something like Kaijus. I think that one of the best ways that they'll play around this is by utilizing Baylor Drock, who provides zombies with a non-targeting banish, as well as Super Poly into Drago Necro Nether Soul Dragon, which is very easily doable with Zombie World on the board. I really love Vampire Sucker as a card, and I'm hoping that Eldritch's eventual incorporation of other zombie cards into its strategy will help to shine a light on just how strong Vampire Sucker really is. The last card that we're going to talk about here is Solemn Judgment, specifically the Ultimate Rare version. So Solemn Judgment is an OTS 12 Ultimate Rare, and I think that most people view it as a staple. Even though it's not in every single deck, it's a generic, really amazing strong card, and it's also one of the game's most iconic cards, coming out way back in Metal Raiders. It sees play in basically every single control deck, as an answer to almost any card including Lightning Storm, and I believe it did even see play in some combo decks before as a side deck answer to cards like Evenly Matched. At the moment, we're seeing Ultimate Rare Solemn Judgment all the way up at $90 a piece, which is above the $60 to $70 price range that we're more accustomed to seeing at over the last couple of months. I believe that a little while ago, I talked about investing in staple Ultimate Rare cards, and I even cited Solemn Judgment as an example, Another card that I talked about is Pot of Desires, which has already spiked in price, and this is largely because these generic staple cards in Ultimate Rare are high rarities that are always among prime buyout targets as soon as they really become a part of the meta and they get a bit older. I don't think this card is actually likely to fall in price anytime soon. In fact, I would argue that it's going to go up in price to around the $100 to $120 price range. The exact extent is kind of up in the air, right? Since there are a couple of other nice rarities of this card, including the Ghost Gold Rare and then of course the original MRD printing. Only time can tell us which one of these is ultimately going to be the highest and best rarity, and what you think will likely determine what you do with this card if you have it. Alright guys, that is it for today's video. I'm fairly sure that I'll be back in a couple of days with a whole ton of other buyouts to cover, since they've been coming at us basically every single day. Hopefully you guys are taking advantage of all of this and moving cards at these inflated prices, and then you can buy them back after some of the hype has settled down. We have lots of time and locals might not start up for a while, so you may as well make some money while you're in self-isolation. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy the conversation today, please hit that thumbs up button for me, and of course make sure that you guys comment down below. Let me know what else is going on in the market that I may have missed, so that I can do my best to keep all of you as informed as possible. And if you haven't already, please make sure you hit that subscribe button for all of the latest content from Tombox and myself here on the channel. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.